Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode loves Irish history and mythology and resides in County Down. They also write historical fantasy that intertwines Irish mythology with real-life history.
Her debut novel, The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, is the first book of the Gale Song series, and the second book is scheduled for release in September this year. We would like to warmly welcome Shauna Lawless.
Hello, Shauna.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well, yeah. We had a bit of a chat off mic about how poorly the year's started, but I'm optimistic that it's going to be good going forwards. It must be exciting to have a book coming out later this year, the second book in the series, no less.
Yes, it is very exciting. It's a little bit more nerve-wracking, maybe. I just the first one was sort of a shot in the dark, and I was just hoping people would like the book. But with the second book, it's a bit more, are people gonna like it? I'm a bit more nervous.
Oh, okay. Fascinating. Did you have it? It seems like there was a really good response to your first book, though.
There has been. I've been getting lots of lovely messages from readers, and it has done very well, and everyone's very happy. So it's been a wonderful experience, but I didn't expect it to be like this. I think publishing is very difficult to be in.
Yeah.
You're not guaranteed sales. You're not guaranteed that people will even see your book or be interested in it. So I was very mindful of that when my book was released. It's lovely to hope that it'll do well, but you can't expect that it will.
Well, it's the best kind of surprise you could have had from it, isn't it, though? To be nicely surprised that, oh, good, everyone's enjoying it. I think that's...
Yeah.
We are happy for you. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
No, it has. It's all gone well, and better really than expected. And it's been actually just a really lovely journey at all stages, really, from signing the contracts and going through the edits and the book cover design. Every stage has really just been a fantastic experience for me.
Yeah.
So I've had this lovely first experience, so I'm just really hoping with the sequel I have a lovely sequel experience too, and it's not that sort of difficult second album syndrome.
There's no temptation just to be like, oh, I've done this now. Just being like, that was a good experience. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no. I signed a 3-book deal, so onwards we must go.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you.
We're of course going to be reading some short stories today.
Yes.
Our regular listeners do know how it goes, but for those of you joining us for the first time, new year, new podcast, there will be 3 stories told in this episode. Each of them has been written to the same shared prompt, and this week that prompt is tomorrow. Ben, you'll be reading first.
Tomorrow. The villagers were welcoming in the spring, which came as a great relief to my heart. Their people had lived in the vast wilderness since long before the Spaniards had tried to drive them away, and I felt obligated to pursue civility wherever I could with them. I was employed at the time to marshal wagon trains from the eastern states through their land. Those wagons contained families, businessmen, and sometimes even those who had been chewed up and spat all the way over the Atlantic by the machinations of European politics. They shared a common desperation to seize the chance to make a new life for themselves in the virgin land that yet lay in the west. I had heard many tales of the horrors of that journey, which had befallen others like myself, and my mind was well stocked with anecdotes on the bloody differences between the natives and ourselves. Yet I spoke their language, or a weak approximation of it, thanks to a chance prolonged encounter in my younger days during a blizzard with one of their kind far to the north. They took great care to explain to me the sanctity of their land, claiming that spirits called it home also. When I asked them who these spirits were, I could only roughly translate their reply to mean that the people of yesterday always guide the tomorrows of those who live today. I do not know that I fully understand it even now, but it is the attempt at understanding that has provided me with purpose later in life. Knowing it was needed, I made a promise never to desecrate the holy hunting grounds, lakes, and waterfalls of their existence. In exchange, I would be allowed to perform my work unmolested. We know in our society that a man is only as good as his word, and in theirs it is true also, although the price extracted for transgressions in that regard marks a difference between our cultures. My wagon trains crossed the plains and trundled along a carefully marked path through their lands in the summer months, and by the autumn I knew them well enough to be brought into their celebrations when I chanced to be nearby during one of their fetes. It took me some time on that unseasonably warm October night to discover that it was a wedding, or perhaps it would be more appropriate to say their ceremony was a binding of two souls without any concept of our Lord's blessing. I found myself moved to whisper a prayer on their behalf, in the hopes to sanctify their union in the eyes of all men. That was the first time that I saw the poles at the heart of their village. Magnificent painted carvings of animals stacked atop each other to tower over the village. Some were barely recognisable as things of our shared earth, and I felt a sense of great peace to be by something so clearly crafted with reverence. Their laughter is our laughter, and though I was an outsider, I have rarely felt such kinship with those who are other than my own people as I did on that night. I returned, eyes red from pipe smoke, to my own wagon which I had left by a creek at the head of the latest wagon train. As I arrived, a smile yet lingering on my face, I saw the order of wagons had changed. One of the merchants, looking to establish themselves in the wild land of opportunity, had pulled his wagon forwards to stand in the shadowy lee of my own. The painted lettering upon the side was so large that it could even be read in the small moonlight of that evening. Cunning Remembrances, bought and sold, Badu Esquire. The man himself was waiting by my fire spot and appeared to be reading a small book by the light of his lamp, which he balanced on one of his knees. "So, you're a book peddler?" I asked as a way of greeting, causing him to look up. The man's eyes were trapped behind thick spectacles which distorted their watery hazel colouring and made them appear like the large eyes of a cow had been poorly stuffed into his already unhandsome face. I was struck by the thought that the wire of the frames was all that stopped those stolen eyes from popping back out. "Paper, glue, leather. That's all books are. What matters is what fills them. Mine are filled with cunning remembrances, the meditations of Aurelius, the campaigns of Ixander against the Persians, those learned Italian men who started the church. All of their knowledge is woven through my wares, with the thread of the gods, ink." As he spoke, seemingly uncaring whether I was listening or not, I noticed that a freshly shot doe lay draped over his wagon steps. "Did you shoot that?" I asked, dreading the answer. "I had thought we might share it, as I had the means to make the animal's end with a borrowed rifle, and I know you to be a practical sort of man who would likely be skilled in the arts of butchery. I myself am lacking such knowledge, and as my stores have been severely depleted by the length of our route, I had hoped to replenish them with what remains after our meal." "Where did you shoot the deer?" "In a glade, not far from here. I crossed the creek and encountered the animal at the lip of a waterfall." "Is something the matter?" "You'd best hope not, but you will go hungry tonight. I told you and the rest of them to stay with the wagons unless I say otherwise." "I felt that rule would not apply to a hungry man in my position." I left him, not wishing to waste any more of my breath on his indulgent pomposity. The man was somehow both soft and cruel, a combination which made my hand itch to draw iron. I lugged the carcass of the doe, which I guessed was likely pregnant at that time of year, back to the village in the hopes that I might be able to smooth the transgression before it was discovered. The cheerful village I had left greeted me with immediate hostility when I returned. I was quickly surrounded by the hunters, warriors, and the elders of the tribe, who made it clear they required an explanation. My words, shaky with fear, did not move them, and a moment later I felt a blow land on the back of my head, which darkened my vision and put me in a dreamless state of sleep. I was startled by the darkness when I first reopened my eyes, and realized I was standing up. The sound of my breath was close, and a strange tightness pinned my arms to my sides. My head pounded from the blow, and I felt dried blood crack on the nape of my neck as I squirmed. I was trapped. I believed myself to have been in there for 2 days before I realised I would not necessarily die of confinement within that pole. They had begun to work on the outside of it, and I heard them carving. The noise, so quiet, still felt like it was deafening. I railed against them, screamed and begged for release until my mind became overwhelmed by panic, then eventually subsided into quiet serenity. I fell silent. There was a peculiar state of mind that I had arrived at, which felt like untrodden ground. Perhaps, I wondered, it was what those people in the wagons were truly seeking. It was a peaceful acceptance of the realities of the world and my relative place in it. I felt connected to every person, be they native or be they colonizers, in a way that I had not experienced before. I do not know how they knew I was ready, but it was then that they lifted me from my prison. I was sodden with my own filth, but I remember smiling at them, to which they nodded knowingly. My previous responsibilities had broken my promise to them, and they had enlightened me as a punishment. They did not speak to me again. I knew their mercy was banishment. They toppled the short pole I had been trapped inside and gave me the rope to drag it with me wherever I would go. I was free. With the benefit of the intervening years, I feel they were a people of yesterday, and I carry what few lessons they managed to convey to me still. They are gone from the country, for the most part now, destroyed callously by my people's reckless greed, our desire to prove we know better. I often look upon the pole they gave me and think of them, hoping to find some guidance for our tomorrows.
Oh, that was profoundly moving, man.
Oh, do you think so?
That was a wonderful
Good.
story.
Thank you. It's very kind.
I have to immediately draw attention to what I wrote down was a sense of calm dread and anger when he was confronting the man who shot the deer.
Yes.
Just something about some of it is obviously in the delivery in your performance, but that you can feel in the words that cold wash. You didn't need to really go into detail about how his mind was kind of spinning out the implications of what that meant.
Yeah.
There was just something so carefully and elegantly constructed about that moment that, for me, that stood out in the story as the highlight.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that bit too.
Confronted by a man who isn't ready to embrace the old in this new world they're making. Yeah, just
well, it's
while ironically selling books full of old wisdoms and.
But he's sort of because he is this kind of purveyor of, the supposed canon of literature and intellectual thought, that I don't think it occurs to him that other people might have a different way of looking at the world that's equally valuable and useful and legitimate. That guy's sort of, that Badu character is sort of supposed to be an example of where our sort of Western sort of European sensibilities can go wrong.
Yeah.
I think it was a tricky one to navigate, just because I'm obviously not Native American at all. I have no idea about most of this stuff, but it just sort of feels to me that there was a moment where where one might have felt like they were between two worlds.
Yeah.
With this expansion into the the Wild West, as the Americans have it. But there were people there, and they've been there for a long time, and they have a very different way of living. And they were, as I say, they were by and large destroyed very callously. Yeah.
Where did you?
Cheerful start to the new year.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, where did the seed of the idea? Where did that come from? That's something that's been in your head for a while, or?
A few months, I think. I live in Cambridge in England, and there is a museum here called the Archaeology and Anthropology Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And it is filled with fascinating things from some cultures that don't exist anymore, and from other cultures that still do. And they're all bound up in that thing that a lot of museums are doing at the moment, where they're giving things back that they sort of stole from wherever they took it from, like the British Museum with the marbles and all that stuff. Anyway, one of the things that they have in this museum is a massive totem pole, which they had to take the roof off the building and crane it in and all that stuff. And I was walking around it, just pretty transfixed by the carving, and it's hollow, and you can sort of see inside it from one of the angles from where a bit of the wood's rotted. And at the time, I thought that would be an absolutely horrible thing to do, to put someone inside one of those totem poles in the middle of a village. So it sort of came from a fairly sort of macabre idea of torturing somebody. And then I sort of tried to get a bit deeper on the idea with why that might be the case. And then just to follow up on that, when I was reading up on totem poles, when I was doing my research for this story, I found something called shame poles.
Yeah.
Have you encountered this before?
No.
No. So they're typically used to shame someone who has done something wrong. Like I think there's an American company that owes Native Americans like $5 billion because they spilled oil everywhere. And they made a shame pole of this guy, the CEO of this company, and it's like a carving of his face on the pole. So I thought I could potentially marry these two ideas together and maybe teach someone a lesson. One of these, because he is sort of partially responsible. I feel this character, like he is sort of
He's been careless with
yes.
the rules that he's been given.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And it's although he didn't do necessarily personally make the transgression, he did. It was on his watch. It was his responsibility, and he gave them a promise. And as he sort of says at the start, that means very different things, but also very similar things. And he learns that the hard way.
It made me. It really put me in mind of sensory deprivation tanks that people do.
I've done one.
Have you?
Yeah.
How was that?
I really liked it. It felt like there was nothing like weighing my mind down. So my mind was just going really fast, like working through loads of stuff. And I got massive time dilation as well whilst I was in it. So it was really good fun for me. But I have also heard that some people really, really don't like it.
I will try it, but only if you're outside, and if I knock twice, you just open the lid.
Sure.
That's the deal.
Sure.
Or I can have an audio book on.
But yeah, that's a very good point. I guess I must have been drawing on my personal experience with that.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. I hadn't even considered that, but I think you've got that right.
I've unlocked a core memory.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. Thanks for that feedback, everyone. Is there anything that you would have thought that you would have changed, Shauna? Like that you would have tweaked?
Well, I really, really loved it. I really loved the voice of the character and kind of going through the memory. The only other thing, just it maybe wouldn't work, is having the other character, the guy that sells the books, in another pool beside him.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that's a pretty good idea.
With the dough.
Yeah, he's got the dough sort of strapped to him or something.
Yeah.
I think my feeling was that had that guy been caught by them, they probably would have just killed him. I think he was like too far gone.
Yes.
But I also really like that. I think as an image that is a lot stronger to have, because it sort of almost becomes the crucifixion with the actual criminals on either side of Jesus to a certain degree, doesn't it? If you're going symbolism, if you do that.
Yes, but sometimes stories are where you need them to be, and I can see why you didn't do that, because you wanted it to be like a personal story.
Bit of growth.
Yeah. So no, but I just thought I'd throw that out there, just food for thought.
I think that's a very good idea. And were I to expand this story, because this is currently, we try to write to a word limit of about 1,500. This is 1,498 words, so it is exactly just under the maximum. But if I had another 500 words, I would love to spend a bit more time, sort of dwell on this totem pole image, because I think it's really, really like in person. I found it quite striking, and I want to try and get that across. But yeah, thank you. That's good. That's really good feedback. Well,
right.
If you're ready, then we can move on to your story.
Yes, okay. I do not trust in the water. It has never taught me anything I wish to know, and yet I follow it. Follow it wherever it leads, away from the hungry grass and whispering woods. I do not know where I am going. All I see in the distance is the waterfall. The world around me is dark, the path is clear, and suddenly it is bright, too bright. Everything everywhere sparkles. The serene luminescence doesn't extend itself to me. Green leaves unfurl as I walk by. Orange and yellow flowers bend their stalks to watch me, bringing scents of lavender and lemon, smoke and bitter wine. I could stay here, lie down, breathe in the lavender and make a bed of flowers. But it is a bad idea. I feel as if I were to stop now, the leaves would devour me until I was nothing but bone. Slowly my feet tread forward, following, still following, always. I close my eyes. When I open them, I have reached the end of the path. The river gushes at the top of the waterfall just ahead, full of froth and vigour. It says belief and hope, over and over. It is not this part of the river I distrust. All the same, the words it speaks are meaningless. The water here is too fast to understand. It only repeats words it has heard before. That is all. Meaningless. My attention moves with the current to the cascading water spilling over the precipice. Spray permeates the air, making it cool and damp. I stick out my tongue. Moisture finds its way into my mouth and I smile for a second. Just a second. Then I remember. The water here is Sleeked, a shape-shifting trickster. It goes by many names. Shifra is the one I know best. She will be waiting, watching, thinking on which lies to tell. I keep walking. A dark pool looms ahead, away from the din of water pounding on rocks and swirling currents, and the air quietens. Stillness is seductive, and I inch closer to the edge. It is here that the water is most dangerous. I move slowly, fearing as always what the water will say. And yet I go. I always go, forward, following. I kneel. The mud oozes through the fabric of my skirt and soaks my legs. The coldness catches my breath, but I do not cry out. As expected, I don't have to wait long for the dark-haired Shifra to swim by. A bracelet with 5 spokes appears underneath the water. On each spoke is an image. A dog, a seal, a bear, a lion and a dragon. I know them well, and they fade until only the symbol of the bear remains. What do you wish to ask? Shifra says. I want to know if he is happy, I answer. Shifra giggles. You've asked that before. Sweet girl, you did not like the answer. You called me a liar. You are a liar, I think. I do not say it. I want to know if he forgives me, I ask instead. The water darkens. Come in and find out for yourself. I stare at the water until the bear breaks into hundreds of fragments and is pulled downstream. I reach out to catch it, but the water trickles through my fingers, and for once the urge to do as Shifra suggests overwhelms me. Come in, she had said. Come in and find out for yourself. The thought anchoring me to the muddy verge is thinner than the last time I visited. I think soon it will break, and the water will take me. Or, to be more truthful, I will go. The thread doesn't break today. Instead it tautens and tugs me back. Like last time, I call out to Shifra that she has lied. Just like last time, she smirks and swims out of sight. She knows I will return tomorrow. I do not trust in the water. It has not taught me anything I wish to know. And yet I go. I always go.
That was so layered. Wow, I loved it. Yeah, that was really fun. I got I felt like I got pulled along with the water. Quite a physical reaction to that story, which is fascinating.
It's all the way through it as well.
Yeah.
The water, obviously, like even like the dewdrops on the grass in the early morning, and it's just all this poor character trapped, surrounded by this torturous liquid. It's
Yeah.
So where did the seed of that story come from then?
So when I don't write short stories often, because the danger is when I write a short story, I like it so much that it becomes a novel. So sometimes then when I write something short, I like it to be a bit more surreal. I like to think about themes and feelings and build something around that. And so the story, like, obviously when you write something that's quite surreal, the fun of the story is having people guess what the meaning is. And usually there's lots of different answers. And sort of trying to see what you can get away with. How much information do you have to put in a story for people to understand what you are saying? So, but no, I wrote it fairly quickly. And just sort of sometimes things just come pouring out, and this was one such occasion.
I really like it when that happens. I think you can always sort of. I don't know whether you can tell in the final sort of like finished product, but I sometimes find that the ones that come out really fast are just good straight away, and then the ones that don't, you've got to work at it, and it's sort of you put them next to each other, and maybe you can't tell the difference, or maybe a reader can't tell the difference, but
you know,
yeah.
deep inside.
But is the Shifra an actual name for a shapeshifter, or is that?
So Shifra, it's was an Irish name, but there was a queen of the fairy people who had a name called Shifra. So in Irish mythology, it's different to Irish folklore. So in Irish folklore, the fairy people would have been tricksters, like they would have played tricks on you. So that's where that name came from.
Oh, that's cool. And it's always fascinating when we have a guest who is so well read on like various subjects, and then they actually put it into their writing. That's so cool. So bear symbolism. What did that have a root somewhere in Irish mythology as well?
Well, not especially. That it is not all about Irish mythology. It's that those 5 symbols mean something to the character. Right. And so the bear who remains obviously has meaning to her, and that's who she's asking questions about.
Yeah, that moment where she thinks you are a liar. That really struck me, that bit, because there's just this very relatable moment where someone has objectively told them something they don't want to hear. This is my interpretation of the scene anyway, and then they're still like doubling down on that not being correct.
Yeah.
I've lost count of the amount of times that I've either been the shapeshifter in that situation or the woman asking the shapeshifter.
Yes.
So I think we can all feel that one.
For me, it was the loop that she's clearly in. She knows she's going to go back tomorrow, and just each day, we know she's nearing the end of that sort of metaphorical, and it sounded almost literal tether, where she thought, maybe I'll just go in. She knows she can't do this forever, but there's something staying this character, and we don't know what. And that's, like you say, you want to infer as much as possible in a short story, and it's so densely packed with stories you could unfold from what is there that it's brilliantly crafted.
I had a really good time listening to it. I also really liked this right at the start, this idea of shapeshifter in water. I know it's particularly simple, and I'm not drilling, I'm not reducing the story to this, but I liked that concept of horror right at the start, because the idea that the shapeshifter is in water, so you wouldn't, even whilst they're changing shape, you wouldn't be able to see them, is quite terrifying, I think.
Yes, that's something that maybe is a bit inspired by Irish folklore as well. There's lots of rivers in Ireland that are named after women. And you
Ah.
normally find, like, in translations of folklore, a lot of that happened in the Victorian era. And it's funny, lots of people, I suppose, have noted that during that time, of the translations, people would put their own thoughts or morals onto the stories. And so it's a very Christian time, and quite often the translators would decide that the rivers were named after women because, and they'd be translating stories, and it would usually be because the woman was too curious for her own good, or
Oh, those pesky curious women.
I know, how dare they? Or they were seeking too much knowledge. And of course, you have like banshees, and kind of these, like, there's always women that are kind of scary.
Yeah.
Phil.
You've painted such a good picture there. I can see the sort of tonsured monk illustrating this story and just being like, I'm absolutely going to make it so that they shouldn't have looked in the river. Like, it's their fault.
They tempted Adam with the
Here's the
apple,
deal.
and curiosity is their sin.
Perhaps, Your Grace, we could say there were jobs in the river, and the women were seeking them also. Yes, good. Write it down. Write it down.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was a really nice story, and I feel like that one's going to stick with me, and I'm going to be unpacking the symbolism and stuff for a while. So that was really cool. Oh, the other thing I'd mention is that there's always one thing that connects, or there's often one thing that connects all the different stories that we tell during an episode. And at the moment, it's waterfalls. Because I mentioned a waterfall, you've mentioned a waterfall. So if there's one in Nick's story, then we've done this again.
I know we've had a telepathic session where we've decided tomorrow is not the theme; it's waterfalls.
Yeah, it's waterfalls. Yeah, that's it. Top notch. Right. Well, speaking of, Nico, when you're ready.
Very well. I'll do it tomorrow, I said. It's a fantastic platitude that you can give to yourself. I tell myself the lie to stave off the anxiety of having to put my thoughts into actions. Tomorrow is the day on which I will do the thing. Its intangential nature protects me from my responsibilities. If I do it tomorrow, I can take this time for myself, catch up on a million other promised tomorrow's tasks, and sell myself a warped version of the truth. That I have done what I promised. Tomorrow's always there. It's sat, waiting for us to get to it. And when your next day starts, there's tomorrow again, perched vulture-like on the horizon, ready to gnaw at the bones of my burnout. It soothes the ambient guilt of the incomplete. I'll do it tomorrow. The factors that push these things to tomorrow, the geographical, the monetary, they prey on the promise of a better day. A latter day in which you become a saint. Mormon-like, you find your eternal paradise planet when, by the strength of your own will, you tackle tomorrow's tasks. You ascend to godhood, illuminated by the brilliance of your own divine truth. You did it, right here and right when you said you would. Tomorrow. I never visit my mum. That's not true, it's hyperbole, but I don't go enough. By whose rules are these, though? Who sets that metric for visitation? Is it those mad folk who visit their parents 2 nights every week? Supper with the family and a bit of light board gaming? Monopoly that doesn't end in savagery? Unflipped tables and not a drop of vino quaffed? If it's them, then I have failed so drastically I cannot call myself a son. But it's so far, I tell myself. Then I travel that same distance for my friends as often as my legs can carry me. The trains, too, they do a lot of the work, but I'm hardly going to give them credit for my mammoth efforts. So is it that? Even when I was young and I slept 20 feet from my mum and stepdad, mercifully divided by a wall to shield them from the amorous activities of teenage boys, I spent scant time with them. I saw my friends. I slept on other people's bedroom floors after night-long gaming sessions. I drank and fell asleep in people's gardens. I lived the life of the young, and I revelled in my knowledge that I had a million tomorrows, and I'd never be old, and they wouldn't get it anyway. I worry it's because she's ill that I don't go. But I remember those heady days of youth and the intervening years between. We are not visiting folk. They don't come to me, nor I to them. They're contented in a place I could never find contentment. So I range and learn and fill my time with bourbon over ice, deep conversations and dice rolling. And they watch their soaps. I say I don't judge them for it, but quietly I do. I never resent them, but I can't understand them. They don't understand me either, I know that. My angry music, as they call it, alienates them. But we love each other, which is what counts, isn't it? So the visit to them becomes not tomorrow, which is always so tantalizingly close, but instead the next weekend that I'm free. Tomorrow's big ugly brother, the one with missing teeth and a widow's peak. It's a convenient one because it's waiting for this imagined time when suddenly I don't have commitments to my music or podcast or friends, and where I don't need time to decompress from work, and where I don't accidentally play Warzone for 4 hours on Saturday morning and then realise it's far too late in the day to go anywhere else. Which is untrue. Arriving there at 1 in the afternoon is just as good, isn't it? But no, it wouldn't be really, because the day's gone by then, isn't it? By the time you've had a spot of lunch and a chat about the weather, you're back on the M25. Because I have so many things to do tomorrow. So we can't stay. The problem with tomorrow is it feels infinite. Our own mortality is skewed by the promise of another sunrise, upon which the checklists we endlessly fabricate will tick themselves off. There won't be any more laundry to do, and the kitchen will be all nice and clean, and my shoes won't need replacing, and we've had a nice mid-afternoon stroll to enjoy our Saturday, and the weekend isn't even over. Because we have tomorrow. But mortality creeps. The background noise of my mum's illness, an ever-present red light on the power grid map of my subconscious, has begun to dim, and I think about it less. No, that's untrue. I actively worry about it less. I think of other things. When should I start trying to have children? How does one plan a wedding? Why the fuck are houses so expensive? So it sits and waits, this ever-present itch that goes unscratched. But now tomorrow has taken a swing. Tomorrow is getting bored of my mum. That sweet woman who now, as my age increases, seems so young to have gone through all she has. I imagine finding a tumour 15 years from now, and I know I'd never be ready. And then finding more, and then my brain seizing and stuttering. I couldn't do it. I can't imagine doing it, but she has. Stoically plodding on, a girl from the East End, a pearly queen with her chin up and her eyes glittering. She ploughs through all of it. She steals another dozen tomorrows, 100, 1,000. But tomorrow stomps its feet and says, enough. She's ill again, and it's worse. Tomorrow colludes with yesterday, and they close in around her. Her memories falter and disappear like strands of dandelion pollen, youthfully puffed from stalks. They scatter, and she won't be here to see the dandelions. Her yesterdays are gone, and tomorrow sharpens its axe. Get her on her own, it says. With the yesterdays gone and only me in front, who's going to stop me from just ending it all? I don't have any answers. I visited, but not at home. Not that bungalow with seaside air and sticky grandchildren handprints on every surface. Memories of jam on bread and pots of slime replacing the ones my mum can't seem to hold on to. I visit her in the hospital. We loop the conversation more times than I dare to count. She asks me if I know her parents are dead. I do, and I tell her so. I watch her feel that loss again, stinging as though brand new. She calls me by her husband's name. I am, to her, a man on sight, so she calls me by the man's name she knows best. Her son is far younger than this, slimmer, he has longer hair. And then she remembers who I am, and we start again. I buy her tea bags. Green tea, which is what she likes to drink. It's a holdover from Weight Watchers sometime around 2005. No milk in it, so it must be healthier, see? They don't have green tea, but now she does. That's what matters. I buy them now. I find a place where they're available right now, because if I say, we'll find her some tomorrow, we might never do it. She might not have tomorrow, so I have to do it now. And I regret those weekends spent frivolously, those tomorrows I didn't spend holding her hand or telling her about the things I'm doing or reassuring her that I'm fine. But I don't do it. I can't. She says, don't worry about me, live your life. So I agree to half of that bargain. I live as fully as I can, with all the tomorrow she's earned me by caring for a diabetic infant. I cry so deeply that I feel every drop has been wrung from me. I smile with my friends' voices pouring into the space left in me through my headphones. Guilt spun like sugar, fragile around our interactions. I shouldn't be laughing. I shouldn't be living. But I am, and I must. She isn't gone. With science and help and sheer cockney tenacity, she will steal another tomorrow and another and another, and they will be hers, even when she forgets them. When there are no more left for her to take, then I will come to terms with it. I will grieve, I will weep, I will roar at the unkindness of the universe we are forced to live in. But for now, I carry on. Like she does. I will face that music tomorrow.
Well, are you okay? Do you need a minute?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Good. That was extremely moving, and it very much like a stream of consciousness kind of performance and piece of writing. It was fascinating.
So I consciously chose not to edit that.
Oh, really?
I didn't know what I was going to write, and I sat down, and obviously because it's going on now, it was very much at the front of my mind, and I just wrote until I saw that I was at the word limit, and then I wrote an ending.
Okay.
And it honestly was really good for me.
Pretty cathartic.
It was a really good thing to do, to put those words somewhere that wasn't in my head.
I'm very glad to hear that.
I'd recommend it for anyone who's struggling with something. You're not going to publish it. You don't have to read it on a podcast. Just write it down, put it somewhere that isn't knocking around inside of you.
Yeah, I could really hear like the emotion, obviously, in your voice, but also the emotion in the words. You know, and I think anyone who has gone through a difficult time just absolutely can relate to that story and to the emotions. You know, there's so many there. There's anger and denial and sadness and grief and determination. You know, there was so much in that short story, and that's when short stories I suppose, are at their best. You know, they're able sometimes just to contain so much in so few
Yeah.
words, but the words are all the more powerful for that.
Thank you.
And it's still, despite the fact that you didn't edit it, despite the fact that it just came straight out of your brain, it was filled. In fact, I say despite the fact, but it's actually probably because of who you are as a person, who you are as a creative man. But there were still some incredible turns of phrasing that felt very polished, like gnawing at the bones of my burnout was particularly good, I thought. And this idea of tomorrow colluding with yesterday to crowd in around this person, that felt deep. I think is the only word that I could put for that one. Like it was very moving. The whole thing was, but like the fact that there was actually some like real like diamond shine to the wording made it hit a lot harder, I think.
To be fair, I have been thinking about it constantly. So there's been time for these words to buff themselves a bit. And I wasn't actually crying, guys. That was the waterfall to link all my stories.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. The tomorrow feels infinite sentiment was something that I think we were talking about being writing very emotional things that are very relatable. I really felt that one. This concept of just being able to bury your head in the sand and just there's always going to be a tomorrow. And there are moments in everybody's life where they wake up and or something bad happens and they realize that is not fucking true. And it can be extreme. It can be positive to know that, because then you don't take things for granted and everything like that, which is humans sort of naturally seem to regress into that state of taking things for granted wherever possible, don't they? Or at least most of the time. So I think it's important to have these thoughts and create like this, because I feel like you've encapsulated something that you can pass on to somebody else rather than them having to go through something bad in order to get to that point.
True. If anyone ever wants to talk about stuff like this, either drop us a message at Bookcase Tiny on Twitter or find me on Facebook or wherever you want, and I will always be happy to talk to people about this stuff, because it is tough to do it on your own. So there are always open ears here at the Bookcase.
Just to go back to the sort of earlier bit of the story, I feel like, especially because we're all writing stories and obviously with Shauna writing novels and with the book deal and stuff, procrastination is actually a massive deal for everybody. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're doing what we're doing or whether you work in an office or whatever. So finding like tools to get around that and like to tackle that use that as the way into the story felt very good, because it very clever use of a very commonly held problem, and it immediately made me think of something that helped me when I was really feeling like everything was getting on top of me last week at the start of the year, because I just couldn't get anything done. I was worried about the funeral that I was going to on the Friday and all that stuff. And I read it somewhere. I can't remember where I read it, unfortunately. But the sentiment was, if something takes 2 minutes, just do it. Just do it now. Because thinking about it and dwelling on it and writing lists and whatever is going to take longer than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it sounds insanely simple, but it really worked for me. So if anybody is looking for a tool, that's one that I've used recently, and it got me through a difficult week.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, we've done the self-help section of the podcast. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at Bookcase Tiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at Bookcase Tiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?